The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital hummed with that particular frequency that only night shift workers truly understood. It was the sound of exhaustion made audible, a mechanical drone that burrowed into the skull and nested there like a parasite. 2 in the morning, the witching hour, the hour when caffeine stopped working and patients wore thin as surgical gauze. Grace Sullivan stood at the nurse's station, her movements small and deliberate. She was 32 years old, though the premature gray streaking through her dark hair made her look older, much older. The kind of aging that doesn't come from years, but from things seen, things carried. She kept her shoulders hunched forward, her head down, like a woman perpetually bracing for an impact that never quite arrived. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized patient charts. They always trembled, had been trembling for 2 years now, ever since she'd walked away from the only life she'd ever known and disappeared into the anonymous machinery of civilian medicine. "Check out the ghost," Jessica Reed whispered from across the counter. The head charge nurse leaned against the medication cabinet with practiced ease, her arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She gestured with her chin toward Grace. "I swear I dropped a bedpan 5 feet from her yesterday, and she flinched like a grenade went off. How did HR even clear her? She's absolutely useless." Dr. Caleb Sterling looked up from the prescription he was signing. He was 29, though he carried himself with the arrogance of a man twice that age and half as accomplished. Yale Medical School had stamped him with a particular brand of superiority, the kind that confused pedigree with competence. "Diversity hire," Sterling said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Has to be. I asked her for a 16-gauge IV during trauma intake last night, and she just stared at the tray for 5 seconds before moving. 5 seconds. In my OR, 5 seconds is a lifetime. 5 seconds is the difference between a save and a body bag." Grace heard them. She always heard them. Her hearing had been sharpened in places where the snap of a twig could mean an ambush, where the whisper of cloth against rock could mean someone was flanking your position. But she said nothing. She simply tightened her grip on the clipboard until her knuckles went white, until the small crescent moons of her nails bit into her palms. She wasn't just quiet, she was aggressively, almost violently submissive. She took the worst shifts without complaint. She cleaned vomit that orderlies ignored. She let Dr. Sterling berate her for errors she didn't make, for delays that weren't her fault, for the simple crime of existing in his line of sight. She had transferred here from a VA hospital in Ohio 3 months ago. Her file was heavily redacted, marked with enough classification stamps that the hospital administrator, Gerald Henderson, had only glanced at it before signing the hiring paperwork. To everyone at Mercy General, Grace Sullivan was just another burnout, another anxious washout who couldn't hack it in a real emergency room. They had no idea who she really was, and she intended to keep it that way. "Sullivan!" Sterling's voice cracked through the hallway like a whip splitting air. Grace didn't jump, but every muscle in her body locked. She turned slowly, her movements careful, controlled. "Yes, doctor," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, rough around the edges like it hadn't been used much. "Room 402. Post-op appendectomy. His BP is spiking. I told you to push labetalol 20 minutes ago. Why is the chart empty?" Sterling was standing over her now, using his height to intimidate, 6'2" to her 5'5". He smelled of expensive cologne and the particular sweat that comes from stress, not exertion. "I checked his vitals, doctor," Grace said, keeping her eyes fixed on his scuffed loafers. "Italian leather. Probably cost more than she made in a week. His heart rate is bradycardic. If I pushed labetalol, it could have bottomed him out. I was waiting for you to—" "You were waiting." Sterling slammed his hand down on the counter. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet corridor. 2 nurses down the hall jumped. Grace didn't even blink, but her pupils dilated, a primal response she couldn't quite control. "You don't wait to think, Sullivan. You do what I order. You are a nurse. I am the doctor. If I say push the meds, you push the meds. Do I need to report you for insubordination again? No, sir, Grace said, lowering her gaze even further until she was staring at the pattern of the linoleum floor. I'll do it now. She walked away, feeling the heat of their stares burning into her back like laser sights. Pathetic, Jessica muttered as Grace disappeared into the medication room. She's going to kill someone one day. Mark my words. Inside the medication room, Grace leaned against the cool tile wall. Her breathing was shallow, too fast. She closed her eyes. For just a split second, the smell of antiseptic vanished. In its place came the acrid stench of burning jet fuel and copper-sweet blood. She saw a face, young, maybe 19, half his jaw missing, torn away by shrapnel, but his eyes were still alive, still desperate, still gripping her hand in the back of a helicopter while the rotors screamed overhead. Stay with me, Doc. Stay with me. Grace snapped the rubber band on her wrist. Once, twice, 3 times, hard enough to leave marks. It was a grounding technique her therapist had taught her. The sharp sting of present pain to override the phantom pain of memory. She wasn't Doc anymore. She was Grace Sullivan. Just a nurse. Just a quiet, anxious, incompetent nurse who needed this job. Who needed the anonymity. Who needed to disappear into the background noise of bedpans and medication carts and fluorescent lights until the faces stopped visiting her at night. But the quiet was about to shatter. 2 weeks crawled by like wounded soldiers dragging themselves across broken glass. Grace kept her head down. She took the abuse. She flinched at loud noises and avoided eye contact and let them believe she was weak. She carried her 14-gauge angiocath needle in her pocket every shift, a talisman from her old life that she couldn't quite abandon, just in case. Just in case the past came calling and she needed to be ready. And then Tuesday arrived. It was early afternoon when the call came through. Massive pileup on I-5. 18 vehicles, multiple casualties. Mercy General's ER went from controlled chaos to barely contained pandemonium in the span of 15 minutes. Every bay was full. Every doctor was shouting orders. The floor was slick with saline and blood, and the particular kind of panic that comes when the system is pushed past its breaking point. Grace was assigned to Triage Bay 3, assisting Dr. Sterling with a code yellow. The patient was a construction worker named David Morrison, 47 years old, pulled from the crushed cabin of a sedan. He was conscious, talking, complaining of chest pain. It's just bruising from the seatbelt, Sterling announced dismissively, shining a penlight into Morrison's eyes without really looking. Get him a chest x-ray when the machine opens up. Give him some Tylenol and move him to the hallway. We need this bed for the criticals. Doc, it hurts to breathe, Morrison wheezed, clutching his left side. His face was pale, a thin sheen of sweat coating his forehead despite the air conditioning. You broke a rib, Mike. It hurts. That's how broken ribs work. Sterling snapped the words out without looking up from the chart. Sullivan, move him, now. Grace moved to the bedside to unlock the wheels on the gurney, but she paused. Something made her stop. Some instinct that had been honed in places where stopping to look could mean the difference between life and death. She looked at Morrison, really looked at him. His jugular vein was distended, pulsing slightly against the skin of his neck. Not dramatically, but enough. His breathing wasn't just shallow, it was asymmetrical. The right side of his chest was rising normally, but the left side was barely moving at all. Grace's mind flashed back suddenly, unbidden. A memory she'd been suppressing for 2 years. An older nurse named Linda Hartwell. Grace had never met her, but she'd read the incident report when she was reviewing Sterling's file before starting at Mercy General. Linda had hesitated during a code blue. A 19-year-old Marine had died on Sterling's table. Sterling had blamed Linda publicly. She'd been fired. 6 months later, she'd taken her own life. Don't let silence kill another patient. Stop, Grace said. Her voice was different. The rasp was gone. It was level, clinical, absolute, the voice of someone who had commanded men under fire. Sterling spun around, sweat dripping from his brow. "Excuse me?" "Don't move him," Grace said. She didn't raise her voice, but there was iron in it now. "He's not stable." "I am the attending here, Sullivan. I cleared him. Move the damn bed." "Look at his JVD," Grace said, pointing to the patient's neck with a steady hand. "Not trembling anymore. Perfectly still. Look at the tracheal deviation starting. It's slight, but it's there. And listen to his speech pattern. He's air hungry. This isn't a broken rib. It's a tension pneumothorax, and it's evolving fast. If you move him to the hallway, he codes in 5 minutes. He dies in 7. The entire bay went silent. Jessica, who had been stocking gauze nearby, froze mid-motion. Dr. Sterling stared at Grace as if the hospital mouse had just stood up and recited Shakespeare in fluent Latin. "You are a nurse," Sterling hissed, stepping into her personal space, trying to reclaim dominance through proximity. "You do not diagnose. You do not contradict me. You do not—" "Beep, beep, beep," the monitor screamed. Morrison's eyes rolled back into his head. His blood pressure plummeted from 120/80 to 60/40 in the span of a single heartbeat. "He's crashing," Jessica screamed, her voice climbing an octave into pure panic. Sterling's face went white. All the arrogance drained out of him in an instant, replaced by the terrified incompetence of a resident who had just made the wrong call and knew it. Get the crash cart. Tube him. Get anesthesia down here. Someone page—" "No time," Grace said. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask. She didn't tremble. In one fluid motion, Grace reached into her pocket and pulled out the 14-gauge angiocath needle she'd been carrying for 2 years. She ripped Morrison's gown open, exposing his chest. "Sullivan, what the hell are you doing?" Sterling shouted, reaching for her arm to stop her. Grace caught his wrist midair. Her grip was iron, unbreakable. She squeezed hard enough that Sterling's eyes went wide with shock and pain, hard enough that he dropped to one knee involuntarily. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on Morrison's chest, on the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, the exact spot, the only spot. "Step back," she ordered. It wasn't a request. It was a field command, the kind that men with guns obeyed without question. She released Sterling's wrist. He collapsed against the wall, clutching his arm, staring at her with something approaching terror. Grace palpated the chest wall, once, twice, finding the landmarks by touch, by muscle memory that had been drilled into her through hundreds of hours of training and dozens of real-world applications in places where the nearest hospital was a helicopter ride away, and that helicopter might be taking fire. She positioned the needle, and without hesitation, without doubt, without a single tremor in her hands, she drove it into Morrison's chest. The sound was immediate and unmistakable. A hiss, like air escaping from a tire. The trapped air in Morrison's pleural space, the air that had been crushing his lung, compressing his heart, killing him by inches, came rushing out through the needle. Morrison gasped. A massive, life-affirming intake of breath. His back arched off the gurney. The monitor stabilized. Heart rate settled. Blood pressure climbed back toward normal. Grace taped the needle in place with practiced efficiency. She checked Morrison's pupils. Equal and reactive. She palpated the other side of his chest. Normal rise and fall. She took his pulse at the radial artery, strong and steady. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. She turned to find the entire trauma team staring at her. 6 doctors, 4 nurses, 2 paramedics who had just wheeled in another patient and stopped dead in their tracks. All of them frozen, mouths open, eyes wide. Sterling was still on his knees, clutching his wrist, his face a mixture of humiliation and shock and something else. Something that might have been the first stirring of understanding. Needle decompression, Grace said quietly. She let her shoulders slump forward again, let the submissive posture return like a familiar coat. Standard protocol for tension pneumothorax. I'm sorry, doctor. I panicked. You panicked? Sterling whispered. He stood up slowly, unsteadily. You just performed an advanced surgical procedure without a license. You assaulted a physician. You... He looked at Morrison, who was now pink and breathing comfortably, whose life had just been saved by the woman Sterling had been calling incompetent for 3 months. Sterling couldn't deny what had just happened, but his ego was bruised far worse than his wrist. And in that moment, something in him broke. Not in a good way. Not yet. In the way that wounded pride breaks, turning into something sharp and dangerous. Get out, Sterling said. His voice was trembling with rage, with shame, with the particular fury of a man who has been proven catastrophically wrong in front of his peers. Get out of my ER. You're done, Sullivan. I'm going to the board. You assaulted me. You practiced medicine without a license. You'll never work in healthcare again. Security. Yes, doctor, Grace nodded, staring at the floor. I understand. She walked out of the ER, past the stunned staff, past Jessica, whose mouth was still hanging open, past the patient she just saved, who was already asking for water, already complaining about the needle taped to his chest, already alive because Grace Sullivan had refused to stay silent. She went to the locker room, sat on the wooden bench, began to untie her shoes with slow, mechanical movements. She was fired. It was over. She would have to move again, find another small town, disappear again, start over with a new name, a new story, a new set of lies about who she was and where she came from. She reached for her bag and her hand brushed against something in the inner pocket. Old, worn dog tags on a ball chain. She pulled them out and stared at the stamped letters. Lieutenant Commander E. Mackenzie Devgrew Medical Support, call sign, Phantom. She pushed them deep into the bag, into the darkest corner where she wouldn't have to look at them. Grace Sullivan, she whispered to herself. My name is Grace Sullivan. But then her phone buzzed. An encrypted message, a number she hadn't seen in 18 months, but still recognized instantly. Phantom. Emergency. Hawk down. ETA your location 8 minutes. Reaper. The tremors returned instantly, violent this time. Muscle memory of crisis overriding 18 months of suppression. She stood so fast, the bench scraped across the floor. Her mind was already racing, already calculating. Hawk. Wyatt Brennan. The kid from Oklahoma she'd saved in Kandahar 2 years ago when he was 22. Pulled him from a burning Humvee, spent 6 hours putting his shattered spleen back together while they waited for the medevac that almost didn't come. If Jake Thornhill was bringing Wyatt here, it meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. It meant the nearest military hospital was too far. It meant Wyatt was dying. Grace walked to the small window in the locker room. She looked out at the parking lot. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. And then she heard it. A sound she knew better than her own heartbeat. The deep mechanical growl of helicopter rotors. Not the familiar whine of a medical helicopter. Something heavier. Something military. Something that didn't belong in a civilian hospital parking lot. The sound grew louder, shaking the windows, rattling the lockers. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical presence, a pressure wave that made the air itself feel heavier. No, Grace whispered. Not here, please, not here. But the sound kept growing, louder, closer, inevitable. Out in the emergency room, chaos erupted. Patients were screaming. Nurses were running toward the windows. The automatic sliding doors at the ambulance bay blew open and stuck there, jammed by the sheer force of the rotor wash. Outside, in the physician's parking lot, specifically crushing the reserve spot marked Dr. C. Sterling, a massive shadow descended from the gray Seattle sky. It was an MH-60M Blackhawk, but not the standard issue. This machine was matte black, devoid of reflective surfaces, with no identifying numbers painted on the fuselage, no white stars, no unit markings. It was a ghost bird, an asset of the Joint Special Operations Command, the kind of helicopter that didn't officially exist. Dr. Sterling, still fuming from the incident with Grace, stormed toward the ambulance bay doors. Gerald Henderson, the hospital administrator, followed closely behind, his face red with indignation. Paul, the lone, overweight security guard, brought up the rear, clutching his hat against the wind. "This is insane!" Sterling screamed over the roar of the rotors. "They're landing in the staff lot. That's a violation of FAA regulations. I'm going to have their licenses. Paul, get their badge numbers." Paul looked at Sterling like he'd lost his mind. "Doctor, that's a military chopper. I can't just—" "I don't care who they are. They're damaging my BMW." The helicopter touched down. The landing gear groaned as it compressed under the weight. The rotors didn't spin down. They kept turning at high idle, kicking up a storm of grit, candy wrappers, and loose gravel that pelted Sterling's face like tiny bullets. The side door of the Black Hawk slid open with a metallic clack that somehow cut through the roar of the engines. 4 men jumped out. They weren't National Guard. They weren't Coast Guard rescue. They weren't anything Sterling had ever seen on the news. These men were bearded, their faces smeared with grease paint and dirt. They wore multicam trousers and t-shirts stretched tight over plate carriers loaded with ammunition. Their helmets were high-cut Ops Corps models, adorned with strobes, battery packs, and quad-lens panoramic night vision goggles flipped up like insect eyes. And they were armed, heavily armed, short-barreled HK-416 rifles with suppressors hung from single-point slings across their chests. They moved with a predatory fluidity, weapons at the low ready, scanning the perimeter not like visitors, but like operators securing a landing zone in hostile territory. "Hey!" Sterling marched forward, his white coat flapping violently in the rotor wash. He held up one hand like a traffic cop. "You cannot land here. This is a private medical facility. You are trespassing." The lead operator was a tower of a man, 6'4" at least, with a thick red beard and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He didn't slow down. He didn't acknowledge Sterling's existence. He simply walked through the doctor as if Sterling were made of smoke, his shoulder checking Sterling hard enough to send him stumbling backward into a row of shopping carts. The operator reached up to his radio headset. "Havoc to base. We are on deck, securing the asset now." Mr. Henderson found his courage, or at least his sense of bureaucratic authority. He stepped in front of the sliding doors, blocking the entrance, puffing out his chest. "Now see here," Henderson squeaked, his voice cracking. "I am the administrator of this hospital. You cannot bring weapons in here. Who is in charge? I demand to speak to—" The lead operator stopped. He looked down at Henderson. His eyes were icy blue and bloodshot, with dark circles underneath that spoke of 72 hours without sleep. On his plate carrier, a patch read simply, "Reaper." "Move," Reaper said. His voice was gravel, low and dangerous. "I will call the police," Henderson said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Reaper stepped closer, looming over the smaller man. "Sir, we are operating under Title 50 authority, sanctioned by the National Security Council. If you do not move, my team will breach these doors and you will be detained for interfering with a federal operation. Now, move." Henderson scrambled aside like a rabbit fleeing a wolf. The 4 operators stormed into the ER lobby. The waiting room fell silent. A crying baby stopped crying. A man with a broken arm forgot his pain. The presence of these men sucked the oxygen out of the room. They brought the smell of cordite and aviation fuel and old sweat into the sterile environment. Sterling ran in after them, red-faced and panting. "Security! Paul, stop them! They're looking for drugs! That has to be it!" Reaper stopped in the center of the triage area. He didn't look at the patients. He didn't look at the doctors. He scanned the nurse's station with the focused intensity of a man searching for a target. "Where is she?" Reaper barked. Jessica, the charge nurse, was trembling behind the counter. "Who? Who are you looking for?" "The nurse," Reaper said. His hand rested near the pistol on his hip. Not threateningly, habitually. New hire, quiet, scars on her hands. "Where is Phantom?" "Phantom?" Jessica stammered. "We don't have anyone named Phantom. We have a Grace, Grace Sullivan." Reaper looked at his team. He made a hand signal, 2 fingers, then pointing toward the back of the ER. "Clear the back. Find her. You're looking for Sullivan." Sterling laughed. It was a hysterical, high-pitched sound. "The mouse? The incompetent one? I just fired her. She's in the locker room packing her trash." He stepped closer to Reaper, emboldened by his own righteousness. "You guys are here to arrest her, right? Did she kill someone at her last hospital? I knew it. I knew she was a fraud." Reaper turned slowly to face Sterling. The other 3 operators stopped moving. Their hands tightened on their rifles. The air in the room grew heavy, electric. "You fired her?" Reaper asked softly. "Damn right I did," Sterling puffed out his chest. "She assaulted me. She performed an unauthorized procedure. She's unstable." Reaper walked up to Sterling until they were nose to nose. The operator smelled of gunpowder and the particular sweat that comes from fear-induced adrenaline. "If you fired her," Reaper whispered, his voice dropping to a register that made everyone within earshot lean in to hear, "then you just compromised the most valuable medical asset the United States Navy possesses. And if she's left the building, Doctor, I'm going to hold you personally responsible for the death of the man in that chopper." Sterling blinked. His mouth opened. No sound came out. "Check the locker room," Reaper shouted to his team. "Go, now!" In the locker room, Grace had her bag packed. Her shoes were tied. She was standing at the door, hand on the push bar, ready to slip out the back exit and disappear into the city. She heard the heavy boots in the hallway. She knew that cadence. She knew the rhythm of operators moving with purpose. "Don't turn around," she told herself. "Just keep walking. You're Grace Sullivan. You're nobody." "Phantom," the voice echoed off the metal lockers. It was a voice she hadn't heard in 18 months, a voice she had tried to drown out with therapy and medication and 3,000 miles of distance. Grace froze. "Don't make me chase you, Ilara," the voice said, softer now, almost pleading. Ilara, her real name, the name she'd been trying to forget. She slowly turned around. Standing in the doorway was Commander Jake Thornhill, call sign Reaper. He looked older than she remembered, more gray in the beard, darker circles under the eyes, but he was still the mountain of a man who had carried her out of the Zagros Mountains when she took shrapnel to the leg during an extraction gone wrong. "I'm not her anymore, Jake," Ilara said. Her voice was shaking now, all the control she'd built up over 3 months crumbling in an instant. "I'm retired. I'm out. I signed the papers." "There is no out for people like us, Ilara," Jake said, stepping into the room. He left his rifle with his team in the hall. He approached her with open hands, palms up, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "You know that." "I can't do it," Ilara whispered. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't lose another one. I can't have that blood on me again. I'm just a nurse now. I hand out Tylenol. I get yelled at by residents. It's peaceful, Jake. It's quiet." "Peaceful?" Jake scoffed gently. "I saw you in that hallway. You look like a caged animal. You're dying here, Ilara. Slowly." "Why are you here, Jake?" Ilara asked, hardening her expression. "You didn't land a bird in a civilian hospital parking lot just to say hello." Jake's face fell. The tough warrior mask slipped, revealing something underneath that Ilara hadn't seen in all the years she'd known him. Fear. "It's Wyatt," Jake said. Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. "No. Training op. Live fire exercise near the Canadian border. Something went wrong. A ricochet or a malfunction. Jake swallowed hard. He took a hit, neck, just above the clavicle, clipped the subclavian. Ilara closed her eyes. She saw Wyatt's face, 22 years old in Kandahar, the burning Humvee, the screaming, her hands inside his abdomen, holding his shattered spleen together. "Bring him to the ER," Ilara said. "Sterling's an idiot, but the trauma team is capable." "They can't touch him," Jake said grimly. "Why?" "The round that hit him is experimental ordnance, magnetic proximity fuse. It's lodged against his spine. If a surgeon tries to extract it with steel instruments, it detonates. You helped design the extraction protocol. You're the only one who's done it successfully." Jake stepped closer. "Ilara, you do. You're the only person who's ever extracted live ordnance from a body and kept the patient alive. Wyatt has maybe 10 minutes. He's in the bird. He's asking for you." Ilara looked at her hands. They were trembling. Badly. "They shake because you're holding back," Jake said, taking her hands. "They shake because you're a racehorse pulling a milk cart. Look at me." She looked up. "Wyatt is dying," Jake said. "I need you. He needs you. I need the ghost." Ilara closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She pictured the anatomy of the neck, the carotid sheath, the brachial plexus, the vertebral artery. She visualized the approach. When she opened her eyes, the tears were gone. The fear was gone. The mouse was dead. She reached into her locker and grabbed trauma shears, shoving them into her waistband. She ripped the elastic from her hair and retied it, pulling tight. "Where is he?" Ilara asked. Her voice was cold steel. "Back of the bird," Jake said, grinning. "Get him into Trauma Bay 1. Now," Ilara commanded. "I need 6 units of O negative, unwarmed. I need the vascular tray, the thoracotomy kit, and a magnet, a powerful one." "A magnet?" Jake asked. "The round is magnetic triggered," Ilara said. "If we use steel instruments, it arms. It blows. I need titanium. Does this hospital have an MRI suite?" "I think so." "Get your boys to rate it. Everything titanium. 3 minutes or Wyatt bleeds out. Move!" They burst into the hallway. Sterling was still there, phone to his ear. "Yes, they're threatening me," Sterling shouted. "I want them arrested." He looked up and saw Ilara marching down the hall, not hunched, striding, flanked by Reaper. "You," Sterling pointed. "I told you to leave. Security!" Ilara didn't slow. She walked straight up to Sterling. She looked him in the eye for the first time. "Get out of my way, Caleb," she said quietly. "Excuse me? I am the attending." Ilara placed one hand on his chest and shoved. Sterling flew backward, landing hard on the floor. "I am commandeering Trauma Bay 1, Ilara announced. Her voice boomed. "I have a code black surgical emergency incoming. Jessica, blood bank. 6 units O negative in 2 minutes or I come down there myself. Move!" "Yes, ma'am." Jessica grabbed the phone. "It's not ma'am," Reaper yelled. "It's Lieutenant Commander Mackenzie, and you will follow her orders." The ER doors blew open. 2 SEALs rushed in carrying a stretcher. On it lay Wyatt Brennan, 24, pale as death, blood-soaked, a gaping wound in his neck. Ilara looked at him, looked at the wound. "Gloves!" she snapped. A nurse slapped gloves into her hands. Ilara snapped them on. "Let's go to work," she said. And Grace Sullivan ceased to exist. Phantom had returned. Trauma Bay 1 looked like a battlefield hospital now. Commander Jake Thornhill and his team stood guard at the doors, weapons ready, while inside the air was thick with copper and antiseptic. Wyatt Brennan lay on the table, stripped to the waist, his skin ash-gray against the crimson pooling beneath him. "BP is 70/40, Jessica shouted, her voice trembling. "He's in hypovolemic shock." "Pressors wide open," Ilara commanded. The whisper was gone. This was Lieutenant Commander Mackenzie now. "Hang the second bag of O negative. I need his pressure at 90 systolic before I go in, or his heart empties before I can clamp the bleeder. The doors rattled. Someone was trying to force them open. "Open this door," Sterling's muffled voice screamed. "This is assault. This is kidnapping. I have the chief of medicine on the phone." Thornhill flipped the deadbolt without looking back. "Ignore him," Alara said. She held out her hand. "MRI kit." Dave, the radiology tech, stepped forward with shaking hands. The tray held plastic and titanium instruments that looked wrong, clumsy. Tools for surgeries inside MRI machines where steel could kill. "Everything we had," Dave stammered. "Good job, Dave," Alara said. "Now behind the lead shield. If this goes wrong, you don't want to be in the blast radius." Dave's eyes went wide. "Blast radius?" "Behind the shield, now." She picked up titanium forceps. They felt wrong, too light, but steel would kill Wyatt faster than the wound. The room fell silent except for the ventilator's whoosh click and the cardiac monitor's frantic beeping. Ilara stared at the wound, seeing past blood to the architecture beneath. The smart frag round was designed to detonate near vehicle engines, but it had malfunctioned, lodging against Wyatt's C7 vertebra, pressed against nerves that controlled his arm and diaphragm. "Jake," Ilara said, "hold his head, manual traction. If he moves a millimeter, if he coughs, if he flinches, this shifts. If it shifts, it detonates. Everyone in this room dies." Jessica gasped. "It's live?" "Very live," Ilara said. "Jake, traction." Thornhill placed his hands on Wyatt's temples. He looked down at his teammate, then at Ilara. "I trust you, Val. Bring him home." Ilara lowered the forceps. Her hands were perfectly still now, supernaturally still. The adrenaline had burned away the tremors. She was no longer the mouse. She was the machine. She inserted the forceps into the wound. Blood welled up immediately. She couldn't use suction. The metal tip might trigger the fuse. She used gauze sponges instead, dabbing blindly, clearing the field one saturated piece at a time. "I can feel the casing," Ilara whispered. "It's jagged, jacket fragmented on impact, wrapped in fascia." Wyatt's heart rate spiked. The monitor screamed. 140 beats per minute. "He's feeling it," Ilara murmured. "Anesthesia isn't deep enough. Push another 50 of rocuronium and 100 of fentanyl." "Pushing," Jessica said. Her hands were steady now. Ilara's confidence was contagious. Ilara worked with microscopic precision, each movement measured in millimeters. She used the forceps to dissect through tissue layers, separating muscle fibers, avoiding the carotid sheath, dancing around the brachial plexus. "I have the bleeder," she said. "Partial transection of the internal jugular. Clamping now." She placed a plastic hemostat on the vein. Bleeding slowed. Wyatt's pressure ticked up. 80/50. Still critical, but trending right. "Okay," Ilara exhaled. "Now for the hardware." She went deeper. The forceps brushed something hard. The moment she touched it, a faint, high-pitched whine came from the wound. Everyone froze. "What is that?" Dave whispered. "Capacitor charge," Thornhill said. Sweat dripped down his face. "It's waking up." "Don't move," Ilara hissed. "Nobody breathes." The whine grew higher, climbing like a tea kettle approaching boil. The round was sensing disturbance, calculating whether to explode. Ilara closed her eyes. She visualized the MK7 schematic from an EOD briefing years ago. 3-second delay once anti-tamper triggered. 3 seconds between activation and detonation. 3 seconds. That was all. "I have to pull it," Ilara said. "Now. If I go slow, it blows. If I yank too hard, I tear the artery and he bleeds out." "Your call, Phantom," Thornhill said. "On 3, Ilara said. She adjusted her grip, dug in her heels. 1. The whine became a scream. 2. Sterling was pounding on the observation window, oblivious to the blast zone he was trying to enter. 3. Ilara pulled, not a yank, a smooth, powerful extraction. Years of practice in one motion. The device came free with a wet sucking sound. The whine stopped. Silence. Ilara turned and placed the device in a basin of saline that Dave held. "Dave, run," Ilara shouted. "Loading dock. Throw it as far as you can into the vacant lot. Go!" Dave didn't ask questions. He grabbed the basin and sprinted, kicking open the back door. Thornhill watched him go. "Clear?" "Not yet," Ilara said. She dropped the titanium tools and grabbed a steel needle driver. "Now I sew his neck before he bleeds out. 4-O-proline. Now." 10 seconds later, a dull boom shook the hospital. The floor vibrated. Car alarms wailed. The shockwave rattled cabinets. Sterling stopped pounding. The hallway went silent. Inside, Ilara didn't flinch. She was throwing stitches, hands blurring, tying knots, closing layers, sealing the vessel. "BP rising," Jessica said, voice filled with awe. 100/60, sinus rhythm, stabilizing. Ilara placed the final stitch, cut the thread, applied a sterile dressing, stripped off bloody gloves and dropped them. She looked at Thornhill. "He's going to make it." And then the adrenaline dumped. Her knees buckled. Vision grayed. Thornhill caught her. "Easy, Doc. You did good." Ilara's hands were shaking violently now, worse than before. She stared at them like they belonged to someone else. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do this anymore, Jake." "You just did," Thornhill said softly. "You just saved his life." "But for how long? How long before the next one? Before another impossible choice?" Thornhill didn't answer. He just held her while she shook. The doors finally unlocked. Sterling was there, Henderson, Dr. Patricia Ashford, the chief of medicine, 2 Seattle PD officers. Behind them, a crowd of staff and patients. Ilara walked out first, blood on her forehead. Thornhill a step behind. "Arrest her!" Sterling shouted, pointing. "She stole supplies. She endangered the hospital. She set off an explosion." The officers stepped forward uncertainly, looking at the massive seal behind the small nurse. "Miss Sullivan," one officer said carefully, "we need to ask some questions." "She's not saying a word," Thornhill rumbled, "and the name isn't Sullivan." "This is a civilian matter," Henderson squeaked. "She's an employee of Mercy General. She violated every protocol. She's fired and we're pressing charges for reckless endangerment." "Reckless?" The voice came from the trauma bay. Wyatt was sitting up, pale, shirtless, bandaged, but awake. He swung his legs over the gurney. "Wyatt, stay down," Ilara ordered. "I'm good, Ghost," Wyatt rasped. "Just heard someone call the best combat medic in the Northern Hemisphere reckless. Had to see who the idiot was." He stood, swaying, catching himself on the doorframe. "Do you know who you're talking to?" Wyatt asked. "She's a nurse," Sterling spat. "A quiet, incompetent—" "Quiet?" Wyatt laughed dryly. "Yeah, she's quiet. You get quiet when you spend 2 days in a Syrian ditch, keeping pressure on a femoral artery with one hand and returning fire with the other. You get quiet when you choose which friends live and die because you only have one plasma bag." The hallway went silent. "Grace Sullivan," Wyatt said, pointing at Ilara, "is a cover name. That woman is Lieutenant Commander Ilara Mackenzie, call sign, Phantom. Lead Medical Officer, DevGru Red Squadron, 3 years. Silver Star for pulling 12 operators from a Taliban ambush under fire. 2 Purple Hearts. She didn't get those scars from dropping bedpans. She got them pulling my ass from a burning Humvee in Kandahar when I was 22. Sterling's mouth opened. No sound came. "Is this true?" Dr. Ashford asked, stepping forward. "Mitchell. Ilara Mitchell. The Paktia Province ambush. That was you?" Ilara nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "My God," Ashford whispered. She turned to Sterling with disgust. "Dr. Sterling, you told me this morning that Nurse Sullivan was clinically inept. You tried to have her fired for saving a patient. You attempted to prevent surgery on a Tier 1 operator because of protocol?" She didn't follow procedure, Sterling stammered, shrinking. She assaulted me. She is the chain of command, Thornhill interjected. In trauma, her authority supersedes yours, mine, anyone's, because she has the training and the stones to make the call. Thornhill pulled out a satellite phone and hit speaker. This is Admiral Halsey, JSOC Command, a voice boomed. Put Commander Thornhill on. I'm here, Admiral. Target secured? Assets stabilized? Affirmative, but we have a situation with local administration. Put them on. Thornhill shoved the phone at Henderson. Hello? Henderson squeaked. Listen closely. Admiral Halsey's voice cut like a laser. The woman in front of you is a protected national asset. You are impeding a military operation. If you do not stand down and if you press one charge against Commander Mackenzie, I will have your hospital's federal funding pulled so fast the lights will go out before you hang up. Clear? Crystal clear, Admiral, Henderson said quickly, face white. No charges, none at all. Good, put Mackenzie on. Alara took the phone. Admiral, Ilara, his voice softened slightly. Good work today. We need you back. You can't hide in a civilian ER forever. You're a healer, but a warrior first. The team rotates to Yemen in 48 hours. There's an empty seat. It's yours. Ilara looked around. She saw awe in Jessica's eyes, fear in Sterling's, the sterile walls that had been her prison. She looked at Wyatt, alive. At Thornhill, her brother. She looked at her hands, not shaking anymore. Admiral, Ilara started, then paused. She looked at Sterling one last time. Dr. Sterling, Ilara said calmly, about the patient in 402 2 weeks ago. You were right. I didn't push the labetalol. Sterling blinked. What? I didn't push it because he was allergic to beta blockers. It was in his file. If I'd followed your order, I'd have killed him. I fixed your mistake, just like I fixed this one. She handed the phone to Thornhill. Admiral, she said loud enough for the phone to pick up, I'm not coming back to the teams. Thornhill looked shocked. Ilara, I'm not coming back, Ilara repeated, a small smile. But I'm not staying here either. You're not coming back? Thornhill asked, confused. But you just proved you still have it. You're the best. Ilara took a breath. I have the skills, Jake, but not the hunger, not for the fight, not anymore. She walked to Wyatt, adjusted his bandage gently. The war needs fighters, Ilara continued, but fighters need teachers. I'm tired of patching holes in boys who shouldn't be there. Tired of impossible choices. Tired of losing friends. She turned to the phone. Admiral, I'm listening, Commander. I won't deploy, Ilara said firmly. My days in the sandbox are done. But you have 300 combat medic candidates at Naval Warfare Center learning outdated protocols from 10-year-old textbooks. They need someone who knows what modern ballistics do to a human body. Pause on the line. You want to become an instructor? Lead instructor for the Special Operations Combat Medic course, Ilara corrected. Full autonomy over curriculum. Commission reinstated. Strictly stateside. No deployments. I'll teach them to keep you boys alive so I don't have to. Done, the Admiral said instantly. Report to Coronado Monday. Welcome home, Phantom. Thornhill grinned, clapping her shoulder. Instructor Mackenzie, God help those recruits. Only the weak ones, Ilara smiled. She turned to the staff. She walked to Jessica. You stayed, Ilara said softly, taking her hand. When Sterling ran, you stayed. You passed meds. You held the line. You're a good nurse, Jess. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Jessica teared up. Thank you, Commander. Ilara is fine. Finally, Ilara faced Sterling. He was leaning against the wall, deflated, unable to meet her eyes. Dr. Sterling, Ilara said. He looked up, flinching. You have good hands, Ilara said. Mechanically, you're decent, but medicine isn't mechanics. It's humility. She stepped closer, voice lowering. You almost killed a man today because you couldn't admit a nurse might know something. You treat titles, not patients. Pause. I'm leaving. You'll keep your job, your parking spot, but every time you walk into a trauma bay, every time you scream at a nurse for being slow or quiet, remember today. Remember that the person you're yelling at might be the only thing between your patient and a body bag. She held his gaze. Be better, Caleb, or get out of the way. She turned and walked toward the exit. Let's go, she said to the SEALs. We can give you a lift, Thornhill said. Beats the bus. Ilara laughed. First genuine laugh anyone at Mercy had heard. Yeah, one last ride won't hurt. They walked out. Ilara Mackenzie, flanked by 4 deadly men. Outside, the Black Hawk's rotors spun up, whine growing to a roar. The wind whipped Ilara's hair. She didn't fix it. She climbed into the cabin, sitting next to Wyatt, helping with his harness. As the helicopter lifted, blowing debris over Sterling's BMW one last time, Ilara looked down. The hospital shrank below, the small, petty world she was leaving. Not running this time, moving forward. She pulled out the dog tags and placed them around her neck. The cold metal pressed into her sternum with each breath. It felt right. Grace Sullivan was gone. Ilara Mackenzie had come home. The Black Hawk banked over Puget Sound, late afternoon sun glinting off water like scattered diamonds. Inside, the noise was deafening. Ilara sat against the bulkhead watching Wyatt's vitals on a portable monitor. His numbers were holding. Not great, but stable. Enough for now. Thornhill was on the radio giving sitrep. Ilara caught fragments. Mission successful, assets secured, casualty stable, ETA base medical 45. The tremors returned the moment she sat down. Muscle memory of 18 months reasserting itself now that the immediate crisis had passed. Her body remembering it was supposed to be broken. Wyatt noticed. Even half-conscious and medicated, the Oklahoma kid noticed. He reached over and squeezed her wrist gently. You good, Ghost? He mouthed, voice lost in rotor wash. Ilara nodded, but they both knew it was a lie. The helicopter touched down at Joint Base Lewis McChord 20 minutes later. Medical team waiting on tarmac. Full trauma crew with gurney, equipment for a small army. They swarmed Wyatt the moment skids hit concrete, transferring him with practiced efficiency, checking lines, updating monitors, shouting jargon Ilara understood better than her own name. She watched them wheel him toward base hospital, watched until he disappeared through automatic doors. Only then did she breathe. Thornhill appeared at her elbow. Admiral wants to talk, in person, flying in from Virginia tonight. Tonight? Ilara looked at him. Jake, I just performed surgery with half Seattle PD trying to arrest me. I'm covered in blood. Haven't slept in 36 hours. Can it? He's not asking. He's telling. Thornhill's voice was gentle but firm. You pulled off something impossible today. Saved one of ours using a protocol you wrote that command said was too risky. Admiral wants details. Debrief. And I think he wants to make sure you don't disappear again. Ilara closed her eyes. She wanted to argue, but you didn't say no to Admiral Halsey. Not when he flew across country to talk to you. Fine, she said. Where? Base commander's office, 2200, 6 hours to shower, eat, get your story straight. My story is straight. I did my job. Your job was civilian nurse in Seattle, Thornhill said quietly, but you showed up like you never left. Like 18 months didn't happen. Command will want to know why you were ready, why you were carrying that needle, why you knew where to find us when we needed you. He was right. She'd been ready, carrying that needle like a talisman. Part of her new running was temporary, that eventually the life she tried to leave would come calling. 6 hours, she said. Then I talk. Then I'm done. I meant it, Jake. Not going back to teams. I know, Thornhill said, but maybe you're not supposed to. 6 hours later, Ilara sat in a chair too big for her, in an office smelling of old coffee and polish. across from a man who'd commanded naval special operations for a decade. Admiral Marcus Halsey was 63, close-cropped gray hair, eyes that had seen every corner where America sent warriors, 3 stars on shoulder boards, chest full of ribbons telling a story of shadows. He didn't look angry, he looked tired, and maybe proud. "Commander Mackenzie," Halsey said, leaning back, "good to see you, even under these circumstances." "Admiral," Ilara said, spine straight, hands folded, every inch the naval officer she'd been. "I read Thornhill's report. Tension pneumothorax at civilian hospital, needle decompression under duress, then extraction of live Mk7 smart frag from subclavian wound with magnetic ordnance. All with non-standard equipment, no backup, half the hospital trying to stop you." Pause. "Hell of a Tuesday." "Just doing what I was trained for, sir." "That's the thing, though," Halsey leaned forward. "You were trained for combat. FOBS with tactical support and medevac on standby, not civilian ERs with armed SEALs blocking doors and residents trying to arrest you. That takes something else. Improvisation, adaptation, the kind of thinking we can't teach in classrooms." Ilara said nothing. She knew where this was going. "I'm not asking you to deploy again," Halsey said. "Thornhill told me what you said about teaching, training next generation. Damn good idea. We need instructors who've done the job, not career schoolhouse types who learn from manuals. You've got real-world experience worth more than 10 textbooks." "Thank you, sir," Ilara said carefully. "But I have one condition I didn't mention on the phone." Halsey raised an eyebrow. "Listening." "I want to build a bridge," Ilara said, "between military and civilian trauma care. SEALs, Rangers, PJs, we all train for combat medicine. But when we come home, get out, that training doesn't transfer. Civilian hospitals don't know what to do with us, don't understand our protocols, don't trust our judgment. I want to change that." She leaned forward, voice gaining intensity. "I want a rotation program. Combat medics do 6 months Coronado, 6 months embedded in civilian trauma centers, teaching, learning, building relationships. So when the next Wyatt shows up at civilian hospital with injury doctors don't know how to treat, there's someone there who does, someone who can bridge that gap." Halsey was silent, then smiled. Small smile, barely visible. "You want to revolutionize trauma medicine." "I want to save lives, sir. That's all I've ever wanted." "Approved," Halsey said. "With one addition, you'll need help, funding, political support. I'll set up meetings with Surgeon General, VA, whoever you need, but you'll have to sell this. Convince people who don't know you this is worth doing." "I can do that, sir." "I know." Halsey stood, Ilara with him. He extended his hand. "Welcome home, Commander, even if home looks different now." Ilara shook. His grip was firm, certain. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet. You've got 300 recruits in Coronado who wish they'd never heard your name. Make them earn it, Mackenzie. Make them earn that trident." "Yes, sir." As Ilara left the Admiral's office, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 18 months. Not hope exactly, but direction. A mission. For the first time since Syria, she knew what came next. The path ahead would be hard. Building a program from nothing. Fighting bureaucracy. Facing 300 recruits who would test every ounce of her patience. But hard was better than empty. Hard meant purpose. She had 6 months to make it happen. 6 months passed like water flowing downhill. Inevitable. Unstoppable. Ilara threw herself into building her program with the intensity she'd once brought to combat medicine. Wrote curriculum, designed scenarios, recruited instructors, pulled in retired corpsmen and former PJs with years of experience and scars to prove it. Fought bureaucratic battles with Pentagon officials who thought her ideas too radical, expensive, dangerous. Won most battles through will and the kind of reputation that made admirals return calls. First class graduated July. 50 candidates started, 38 finished. The 12 who washed hadn't been weak. They'd been unprepared for Alara's level of excellence. She didn't apologize for attrition. She told critics she'd rather train 38 medics who could save lives under impossible conditions than 50 who'd freeze when shooting started. But Coronado wasn't the only place things changed. 3,000 miles away, in Seattle, Dr. Caleb Sterling was teaching residents in the main conference room. Early morning, night shift handing off to day, everyone running on caffeine and spite. Sterling stood at table head, reviewing last night's case. 47-year-old male, motor vehicle collision, presenting with chest pain and difficulty breathing, Sterling said, clicking through projector images. Initial assessment noted bruising consistent with seatbelt injury. Patient tagged for X-ray and discharged to outpatient follow-up. Pause, looking at residents. Anyone see the problem? Cocky second-year Harris spoke. Sounds appropriate. Chest pain after MVC is usually muscular. Discharge with pain management and follow-up is standard. Sterling's jaw tightened. Look at images again. Patient's neck in admission photo. Harris squinted. Don't see anything unusual. That's the problem, Sterling said quietly. You're not looking, you're assuming. Patient had jugular vein distension, slight tracheal deviation, asymmetric chest rise, signs of tension pneumothorax. If we'd followed initial plan, sent him to hallway for X-ray, he'd have coded in 5 minutes, died in 7. Silence. Who caught it? Another resident asked. Sterling hesitated. This part still hurt, reminded him of failures, arrogance, near-fatal mistakes. A nurse caught it. She saw what I didn't, spoke up when I tried to silence her, saved that patient by refusing to follow my orders. Next slide. Medical Journal article. Field Protocols in Civilian Trauma. Lessons from Combat Medicine. Lead author, Lieutenant Commander E. McKenzie, USN. Published last month, Sterling said. Required reading this rotation. Author is the same nurse who saved that patient. She's now lead instructor at Naval Special Warfare Center, training Navy SEALs, trying to teach people like us to be better. Harris shifted uncomfortably. So what's the lesson? Sterling looked at him, really looked, saw himself 6 months ago. Arrogant, certain, convinced letters after his name meant always right. Humility, Sterling said. A medical degree doesn't make you infallible. The person next to you, the one you're about to dismiss because they lack credentials, might be the only thing between your patient and the morgue. Listen to nurses. Listen to techs. Listen to people who see patients when you're not in the room. They might save you from yourself. Close laptop. Dismissed. And someone find out when Commander McKenzie's next training session is. I want to attend. Later, Sterling sat alone in his office, staring at a framed photograph. Old, faded. Younger him standing beside older nurse Linda Hartwell. She was smiling, arm around his shoulders, looking proud, believing in him. Sterling had kept the photo hidden in a drawer 2 years, unable to look, unable to face the reminder of what his pride had cost. But 3 months ago, after long conversation with hospital therapist, he'd put it back on his desk. Not as punishment, as reminder. Linda made a mistake. He crucified her. She died because of his cruelty, his inability to see her as human, fallible, someone who needed support instead of condemnation. He couldn't bring Linda back, but he could honor her memory by being better, treating people the way she'd treated him when he was terrified intern making rookie mistakes. Sterling pulled out his phone and composed email. Commander McKenzie, you don't know me, but I was the attending who fired you from Mercy General 6 months ago. Writing to apologize and ask if your offer still stands. You said you'd bring training team to Seattle. We need that training. I need that training. If you're willing to teach an old dog new tricks, I'm willing to learn. Respectfully, Dr. Caleb Sterling. Hit send before second guessing. 3 days later, response. Short, direct, exactly what he needed. Dr. Sterling, the offer stands, but I'm not teaching tricks. I'm teaching you to save lives. If you're serious, clear your schedule for October. Bring your whole trauma team. Be ready to work harder than you've ever worked. Commander E. Mackenzie, USN. Sterling smiled. First genuine smile in 2 years. October arrived with crisp autumn air that made Seattle feel different. Leaves turning, air smelling of rain and coffee. Mercy General preparing for something never experienced. Full trauma team from Naval Special Warfare Center conducting week-long intensive training. Civilian doctors, nurses, medics learning combat protocols, practicing scenarios, pushing limits. Leading the team, a woman most had never met but all had heard about. The nurse who'd saved a patient in Navy SEAL same day. The ghost who'd vanished and returned as something more. Ilara arrived Monday morning with 6 instructors and enough equipment to run field hospital. She walked through Mercy doors wearing Navy utilities with rank insignia visible, hair in tight bun, bearing unmistakably military. Jessica Reed saw her first, dropped the chart she was holding. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. She came back. Ilara spotted Jessica, walked over, extended hand. "Good to see you, Jess. How's the ER been?" "Better," Jessica said, shaking with reverence. "Much better since you left. Sterling's different, quieter, more careful. He actually listens now." "Good," Ilara said. "That's what I hoped. Where is he?" "Conference room. He's been preparing all week. I think he's terrified." "He should be," Ilara said with slight smile. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make sure you're ready next time someone crashes through those doors with injuries you've never seen." Training began that afternoon. Ilara didn't waste time with pleasantries. She walked into conference room where 30 staff gathered, doctors and nurses and techs, looking with curiosity and apprehension. Sterling in front row, expression unreadable. "My name is Commander Ilara Mackenzie," she said, voice carrying without effort. "Some know me as the nurse who worked here. That person doesn't exist. For the next week, I'm your instructor. I'll teach things that'll make you uncomfortable, push you past what you think are your limits. Some will hate me by week's end. Fine, I'm not here for approval. I'm here so you don't kill someone because you were too proud to learn." Clicked projector. Image appeared. Combat photograph, grainy, dark. Medic working on wounded soldier in helicopter back. "This is combat medicine," Ilara said. "No sterile fields, no perfect lighting, no time for textbooks. Just you, your training, and a human dying unless you do something right now. Most will never work in these conditions, but principles are same. Speed, precision, deciding when everything's chaos. That's what I'll teach. Next 6 days breaking them down, building back up. Ran scenarios after scenarios, sucking chest wounds, arterial bleeds, crush injuries, blast trauma, things civilian doctors only read about. Made them work with limited supplies, broken equipment, missing staff. Made them make impossible choices. Made them understand what it felt like having someone's life in hands, knowing you might not be enough. Sterling struggled. Good surgeon, technically proficient, but Ilara's scenarios required beyond technique, required instinct, seeing patterns where others saw chaos, willingness to act on incomplete information. By third day, exhausted, frustrated, doubting himself, Ilara pulled him aside after brutal simulation where he'd lost 2 patients because he hesitated, trying to gather more data instead of acting on what he knew. "You're thinking too much," she said, not unkindly but directly, trying to be certain before moving. Good practice in OR, but in trauma, certainty gets people killed. Learn to trust your gut. "My gut has been wrong before," Sterling said quietly. "My gut got someone killed." Ilara looked at him. She knew about Linda. Thornhill had told her the whole story after leaving Seattle. "Linda Hartwell," Ilara said, not a question. Sterling's head snapped up. "How do you know that name?" "Because I asked. Because I wanted to understand why you were the way you were, why you treated nurses like they were incompetent, why you couldn't trust anyone's judgment but your own. Pause. She made a mistake. You blamed her. She died. And you've been punishing yourself by refusing to trust anyone, including yourself. I killed her, Sterling said, voice raw. Maybe not directly, but might as well have. I destroyed her career, her reputation. You can't bring her back, Alara interrupted, but you can honor her by being the kind of doctor she believed you could be, by treating people with the compassion she showed you, by trusting your team the way she wanted you to trust her. That's how you make this right, Caleb, not by being perfect, by being human. Sterling was silent long time, then nodded once. Next day, different. Not perfect, not suddenly transformed, but different. Listened more, second-guessed less, asked for input instead of demanding obedience. When Alara ran final scenario, the impossible one designed to break even experienced combat medics, Sterling saved both patients. Not because he was certain, because he trusted himself and his team enough to act. Final day, Alara stood before the group one last time. They looked exhausted, different, ready. You've done good work this week, Alara said. Learn things I hope you never use. But if you do, if someday someone crashes through those doors with injuries that shouldn't be survivable, you'll be ready. You'll know what to do. And maybe you'll save a life that would have been lost. Pause. One more thing before I go. There's someone here who wants to speak. Conference room door opened. Young woman walked in, 18 years old, but carrying herself with presence beyond her years. Blonde hair and blue eyes. She wore civilian clothes, but something about how she carried herself suggested military bearing. This is Natalie Garrett, Alara said. She's a volunteer here at Mercy General, pre-med, and she has a story. Natalie stepped forward, hands shaking slightly, but voice clear. 11 years ago, Natalie began, I was 7. I lived in a small Afghan village. There was a bombing, school bombing. I was trapped under rubble with shrapnel in my back, dying. Then a woman came, American medic. She dug me out with bare hands, sang to me, told me about California, beaches, sunshine, life beyond war. Stayed 16 hours until helicopter came, saved my life. Natalie's eyes wet now, but she didn't stop. I didn't know her name, didn't know where she went, but I knew I wanted to be like her, save people the way she saved me. So I came to America, learned English, volunteered at this hospital because I wanted to help. And 3 months ago, I saw her again, Commander Mackenzie, the woman who saved me, who taught me one person can make a difference. Turned to Alara. I'm going to medical school next year. After that, joining the Navy, going to be combat medic, because of her, because she showed me what it means to be a healer. Silence. Several crying openly. Even Sterling had tears. Alara walked to Natalie, put hand on her shoulder. I need assistant instructor at Coronado. Someone who understands why this work matters. Someone who's lived it. Interested? Natalie's face lit up. Yes, absolutely yes. Good, Alara said. We leave next week. Pack your bags. As training broke up, people filing out talking excitedly, Sterling approached Alara one last time. Thank you, he said simply, for coming back, for teaching us, for not giving up on me. I didn't come back for you, Caleb, Alara said honestly. I came back for the next patient who walks through those doors. But I'm glad you learned something. And I'm glad Linda's memory is being honored. She deserved better. She did, Sterling agreed. I'm trying to be better. Every day. That's all any of us can do, Alara said. Extended hand. Good luck, Doctor. Sterling shook it. Good luck, Commander. As Alara stepped through the hospital doors for what she knew would be the final time, she carried something she hadn't brought the first time she left. Certainty. Not running. Building. The difference felt like shedding chains. She climbed into van with her team, Natalie sitting beside her with backpack full of dreams and determination. Ilara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The ghost wasn't hiding anymore. The ghost was teaching. The ghost was building a legacy that would outlive her. And somewhere in the distance, barely visible through autumn rain, a helicopter lifted from Joint Base Lewis McChord, carrying another group of wounded warriors home. Some would survive because of protocols Ilara had written. Some would be saved by medics she trained. The work was never done. The mission never ended. But for the first time in years, Ilara felt like she was fighting the right battle. The mouse was dead. The ghost had found her purpose. And the legend was just beginning. 2 years later, October 2026, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Lecture hall stiflingly hot. 50 young candidates, Navy corpsmen, Army medics, Air Force PJs, sat in rigid silence. Exhausted, muddy, terrified. Door at front opened. Lieutenant Commander Ilara Mackenzie walked in. Crisp Navy working fatigues, silver oak leaf insignia shining on collar. She walked with confident stride, carrying single laser pointer. Stopped at podium and scanned room. Eyes sharp. Waited until silence was absolute. "My name is Commander Mackenzie," she said, voice projecting without microphone. "Most think you're here to learn tourniquet. You're wrong. Can teach a monkey to put on tourniquet." Clicked button. Screen lit with video of chaotic ambush. Dust, screaming, gunfire. "You're here to learn how to think when the world is ending," Ilara said. "How to keep hands steady when heart hammers at 200. I'm going to teach you how to cheat death." Step from podium, walk down center aisle, looking each recruit in eye. "Some heard stories about me," she said. "Heard I'm a ghost. Heard I'm hard." Stopped in front of young recruit whose hands trembled slightly on desk. Looked at hands, then eyes. Smiled, genuine, encouraging. "They're right," she whispered. "But stick with me and I'll make you unbreakable." Turn back to board. "Lights out, let's begin." At back of room, Natalie Garrett stood in instructor utilities, name tape visible. 20 years old now, but already carrying the bearing of someone who'd seen what mattered. She watched Ilara with pride, with understanding. She'd been there, been saved, been broken, been rebuilt. Now she was passing it forward. The cycle continued, the ghost taught, the legend grew. And somewhere in a small hospital in Seattle, Dr. Caleb Sterling looked at a framed photo of Linda Hartwell and smiled, knowing that her death had not been in vain, that her memory lived on in every nurse he now trusted, every resident he now taught to listen, every patient who lived because someone had the courage to speak up. In his other hand, Sterling held a letter, an acceptance notification. He'd been approved for the civilian rotation program Ilara had built. 6 months embedded with combat medics at Coronado, learning what he should have learned years ago. He looked at Linda's photo one more time. "I'm going to get it right this time," he whispered. "I promise." Outside his window, the Seattle rain fell soft and steady, washing the city clean. And in the distance, if you listen carefully, you could almost hear the echo of helicopter rotors carrying warriors home. The mouse was dead. The ghost had found her purpose, and the legacy would never end.